Welcome in to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. A podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis. It's time to flock up. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. We continue with our player profiles, a look back at the season that was for a specific player. Today, it is Mr. Jose Alvarado. Jim Eichenhofer may be taller than Jose Alvarado.
Oh, how dare you, Gus?
Do you have as much energy? No, look, that wasn't a slight to you. I'm just saying, when you look at him on a basketball court, he is not the tallest, but he could be.
He's
one with the biggest heart.
He's one of the only players here that I don't have to like crane my neck at to look up at when we're doing interviews at the practice facilities.
Dude, I'm 5'7". I look up at Aaron Summers, okay? The Graph, JD. Yeah. I'm the short. It's just crazy.
Yeah, It's pretty cool. It's, we're going to get into this with Christian Clark, but I mean, it is pretty amazing that you have kind of a quote unquote normal sized human being that's able to do what he does on the court. And I think that's one of the reasons why people love him so much, is because you can kind of relate to him. You can't relate to some of these guys that are like 6'8", 220, like athletic machines. It's like you look out on the court and you're just like, I don't think I'm ever going to be that, but maybe I can be the guy, the scrappy guy, the hustle guy, the way Jose is.
So what do you think back when you look at this season here, when it comes to Jose, from just waiting for him to get back on the court at the start of the season to at the end of the season? I almost feel like a dependency.
Yeah, I mean, I think he did prove repeatedly over the course of the season how important he was. I mean, how vital he was. Just if you look at the way the team started the season, where they were 4-6, I think, in the first 10 games, and they struggled out of the gate. It definitely seemed like he made an immediate impact on the results, played really well. And then there were games where, they were low energy, kind of struggling, and then he would come in and change the course of the game. He and Naji Marshall were very similar in that regard. I know everyone who listens to this podcast is also reading all of my season recaps. I mean, that's a given.
Yes, it is required.
But I mean, I listed in his 3 most notable games. To me, the game at Miami was number 1 on my list, because he came back to the game where he was suspended against the Heat and was huge in them winning there in Miami by a big margin. The play-in game where he was critical against Sacramento and they get in the playoffs that way. And then New Year's Eve, my own personal favorite, against the LA Lakers. He's stealing the ball from LeBron. He's stealing the ball from Anthony Davis. He takes it from Jackson Hayes, another one of our old friends, and was probably the MVP of that game after the Pelicans had lost to them in ugly fashion in Las Vegas in an in-season tournament. So there were just a lot of games when I went back through that stood out, where you go back and say he might be the backup point guard on this team, but he was also the most valuable player in a lot of these games that they won.
No doubt. Well, Christian Clark of The Advocate and the Picayune is here to give us his thoughts and his opinions as to Jose Alvarado's season this past year. All right, we continue with our player profiles. Mr. Christian Clark, for a second time, we've brought you back in. Just when you thought it was time for vacation, Eichenhofer says, we need one more player, and we need your expertise on someone that, man, I got to tell you, I think, where would you put him in terms of fan favorite for players?
I mean, he might be number 1. I mean, he I think he's up there with like most popular people in New Orleans, just in general, highest approval rating. I mean, it feels like he's up there with a lot of the artists and entertainers, a lot of the Saints players. I mean, the fans love them, some Jose Alvarado.
Yeah, I mean, I think very unscientific study that I did during the season, it seems like from where we sit in the writers area, Christian, if you look through the stands and you see people's backs from where we sit, it does seem like there's games where there's more Alvarado jerseys than there are anyone else. I mean, I think Zion's up there as well. You see a ton of Zion jerseys and stuff that people have bought over the last few years, but I think Jose might be giving him a run for his money. So that's pretty impressive for an undrafted guy who's 3 years into his career. But I guess we could start in terms of Jose with How did you kind of view the season that he had overall? I think I was kind of laughing to myself a little bit on the day that we did exit interviews because I asked him a positive question about, you improved your 3-point shot. And he looked at me like I was totally insane because I think he was thinking about just how he shot in that Oklahoma City series where he said something about to the effect of, I only made 1 3-pointer out of 14 or 15. But I mean, overall, how did you see, maybe setting aside the postseason, the playoff series, how the progress that he made in year 3?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone was really disappointed with the way the playoffs went. Jose was definitely not at his best, really struggled shooting the ball. And he was not the only one. It was just a lot of different guys. But when I look at the regular season that Jose put together, I think it was a really solid regular season. I mean, this was his 3rd year in the NBA. Like this year proved beyond a shadow of a doubt to me that Jose Alvarado has a place in an NBA rotation, and he is just a valuable rotation piece. And, a guy who, if he's in your top 8, your top 9, can help you win a lot of games. I mean, I think the way the Pelicans won a lot of those regular season games was they just were putting good basketball players on the floor 1 through 9. I mean, they just kind of crushed teams when they had, like a Zion or BI with a lot of the bench guys out there. And I mean, Jose had a really nice year, defensive pest. The 3-point shooting is a huge thing for him, basically being a 38 3-point shooter on almost 4 attempts per game. It's pretty healthy volume, pretty healthy percentage. The Pelicans were one of the more accurate 3-point shooting teams in the NBA. And I think guys like Jose and Naji off the bench, like knocking down their threes, had a lot to do with that.
You touched on this a little bit or alluded to it. It seems like there's been a kind of a evolution of him going from somebody who was kind of a curiosity. And when you get some of the steals that he gets where something that people have never really seen before, it's kind of like he ends up on the highlights. But it doesn't seem like maybe initially people were like, well, this guy's a legitimate NBA player. This guy's a quality backup point guard. I mean, how do you see how that's evolved over his first 3 years in terms of, maybe the way that he's viewed now compared to when he first came in and people really didn't know much about a guy who I think has said a couple times that he's 5'11" on a good day?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I'm 5'8", and when I, stand in those little scrums, I mean, Jose does not look like he's that much taller than me. Like I'm always, whenever I'm sitting there, in that circle of people interviewing him, I'm like, I don't understand how you're doing this because like, I'm just thinking about like, oh my God, if you threw a me-sized guy out there, they would be like tuna to a bunch of sharks. So I don't know how he's doing it. It's really impressive. To your point earlier, I mean, like he got a lot of attention right off the bat for the Grand Theft Alvarado. I'm going to hide on the baseline and burst into the screen and steal the ball from behind the player. And he still does that, and it's fun. I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But I think, a lot of people look at that and are like, is he just a kind of a gimmick player? And, it's a fun thing that he does, but I still think Jose would like be valuable if there were no Grand Theft Alvarados either.
Yeah. You mentioned this a little bit just now too. He's a lot of people when they watch the NBA, they think, if somebody's 5'8", 5'10", 5'11", that they're going to be targeted defensively. And I think that's the case for a lot of players that are kind of undersized across the NBA. But it seems like if there's one thing that you can say that he does at a really high level, it's defensively. How do you see just the way that he's kind of developed on that end of the floor as well, beyond just the steals? For example, it seems like I feel like a lot of times that teams that kind of go out of their way offensively to say like, okay, we're going to try to post up this guy, maybe 20, 30 years ago that would have been more effective because, players actually did know how to post up. But it feels like now that that's not really part of the offense as much, and therefore sometimes it just kind of throws teams out of whack when they try to do something that they haven't done all season. But, I mean, how do you see the way that he kind of holds up defensively, not just full court but half court as well?
Yeah, he's really strong for a guy who's like 5'9". I mean, he's not easy to like knock off his spot or move around as much. I mean, he just does a great job of staying attached to you. at all times. And I'm thinking about a play when they put the Lakers, I think, in December. They got the ball to Jackson Hayes in the post, and it was, Jackson trying to post up Jose. And I think Jose just stole the ball from him. Mm-hmm. And it really was like, yeah, this is basketball in 2024. A lot of the bigs, they're not post-up bigs anymore. And, like Jose is sneaky good down there when you try to do that stuff to him.
Yeah, I mean, in that same game, there was a play where LeBron was coming at him full steam, and instead of, standing there and taking a charge or, doing an Olay and saying, like, oh, man, this dude's too big, I can't do anything, he just kind of ripped the ball right out of his hands. So that was another example of some of the stuff that he's done defensively that's just impressive. On the offensive end, I mean, you mentioned his three-point shooting, that his first 2 seasons he shot 32% from three-point range. This year he bumped that up to 38%. How much of that do you think is just the time that he's put in and the work on his jumper, and how much of it do you think too is just crucial for him to be able to, just carve out a long career in the NBA?
Yeah, totally. I mean, he's clearly, gotten thousands and thousands of shots up and like really worked to fine tune that part of his game. And I think it's massively important for him. I just think he's got to be like 35% or above to be able to stay on the floor, and he's been able to do that consistently lately. And like kind of a sneaky volume guy for the Pelicans the past few years, like really shows a willingness to just get them up, which is something that I think the Pelicans, need some more of. I think that's been a huge area of growth for him, and like something that's just massive for him to continue to move forward.
We're going to see throughout the offseason. Obviously, we can't predict what the Pelicans are going to do moves-wise, but one of the things that David Griffin talked about in the day after the season ended was just getting more, basketball IQ and stuff like that onto the floor. How valuable do you think that part of it is for Jose, even if, he's in a role where he's playing 15, 20 minutes a game, and if that's the way his career is going to go, which, I think is fine if he's in that, that's a very valuable position. But, how important do you think that was for the Pelicans, that during the minutes that he was on the court, they're having a guy who sees the floor well and is a playmaker and is setting up people for open shots?
Yeah, like the pure point guard types, they're few and far between in today's NBA. Like there's not many Mike Conleys out there. Like when you look at pure point guards, like Jose's the guy in this roster who fits that description the most, I would say. And you could see it. Definitely just bringing pace into the game, like getting the ball off the court quickly, but also just like the ball moves side to side and there's good dribble drive action, just generally speaking when Jose is out there. I think Jose is a guy who like really knows how to play off the Pelicans stars well. Like he understands how to play off of Brandon Ingram. I think he really understands how to play off Zion Williamson. That was something, I continue to enjoy watching this year. Like I think Jose gets Zion, and it could be Jose initiating the offense, getting him through sets, and it also could be him playing off of Zion, in the half court.
It's interesting too, obviously, we talked about so many elements that he brings onto the court and stuff. I always felt too, like when I sat here and said, all right, I want to look back overall on the totality of the season, Christian, the thing that I just think about is I thought this season more than any other, or just maybe it felt like it was needed. I don't know. I felt like this team at times really, really leaned, needed, asked, depended on energy that he brought at times in the games. Did you feel that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there was a lot of like hand-wringing about the handling of the bench at the end of the season. And look, I think it's fine for people to talk about that, but like you also have to acknowledge like the Pelicans were second in the NBA in point differential. And like Jose Alvarado was a massive part of that. And just the energy he was bringing and the effort on a night to night basis. Trey Murphy, like one of the most talented bench players in the league, Larry Nance Jr., really nice player. Naji Marshall had a fantastic year. A lot went into it. But yeah, I think, I do think like a lot of their success in the regular season was just putting good players on the floor, 1 through 9, 1 through 10, and those bench guys just kind of being dogs. I mean, like a lot of that play-in tournament win over the Kings was just Jose Alvarado and Naji Marshall, wanting to win and playing really well. And like the Pelicans bench, spearheaded by those guys, just being better than what the Kings threw out there in terms of their bench.
Christian, final thing for you. 10 days. What a difference 10 days makes. 10 days yesterday was game 1 of the T-Wolves and Nuggets. And everybody from that point on had Minnesota sweeping the defending champs last night, 112-97. Denver now up 3-2. Have you seen a series turn as much as this one?
It's funny. I mean, I kind of look at the Nuggets. I think back to their run in the bubble. I believe they were down 3-1 in the first round series against the Jazz. I believe they were down 3-1 again in their series against the Los Angeles Clippers.
Yeah.
They're a team that like over and over has just shown great resiliency. And I'll be honest, like I was shoveling dirt in them too. I thought they were done. And the biggest reason I thought they were done is I thought Jamal Murray's calf was cooked. He looked terrible in the first 2 games. I think he shot 3 for 18 in game 2. He has looked much better, moving around better. He was great in game 3. Or game 4, and then Jokic was that was like one of the best games I've just ever seen anyone play in game 5. That was insane.
How big, Jim and Christian, was the fact that he did not, Jamal Murray, get suspended for game 3? I mean, could you almost argue that could maybe have changed it? Because to your point, Christian, he has been a huge catalyst. I agree with you. Yesterday, Jokic put on a clinic, but Jamal Murray for 2 games after that was the guy, and you could see the difference. Not only that, the way they're defending, Ant, but what if Murray would have been suspended for a game?
I mean, the Nuggets are not leading the series 3-2, probably. And if I was a Timberwolves fan, I would be livid. I would say that is suspension worthy. I thought Chris Finch had a funny line before the game last night. I think Rudy Gobert got a $75,000 fine for doing like the money gesture to the referees. And Chris Finch just pointed out, how did Jamal Murray get $100K, $25K, only $25K more for throwing a freaking heat pad on the floor? He's like, I want to see an itemized receipt of that.
Yeah, it's funny. Jamal Murray also did the money sign but it was a lot briefer, and it wasn't. I don't think it was like as front and center. He did it kind of quickly, and maybe the NBA is like, okay, well, we already fined him for this. We don't need to fine him for that too. But yeah, that was interesting. I don't want to say shocked that he didn't get suspended, but I don't know. I just feel like you can say good or bad, whatever. It just seems like things have changed so much in the last even 10, 15 years as far as that goes. I feel like back in the David Stern days, he would have tried to throw Jamal Murray out of the league. He would have said, here's your thrown heat pad. I'm throwing you out for the rest of the season or the series. So, but yeah, I heard both sides of the argument at the time. I understood people who were like, well, you don't want the series to be decided by somebody getting suspended. But on the other hand, it was like, yeah, but you also don't want guys throwing equipment onto the court during the game. That was the part that I couldn't believe, was like during the game. It was like while the play was going on, he did that. But anyways.
Yeah, well, I will say this. That's the one thing I'm worried about you on your vacation. You're going up to New York. The first thing you're doing, you're going to go see a basketball game?
Baseball.
A baseball. Don't throw anything on the diamond.
Don't worry. It's going to be 7th graders playing baseball. So if you see me throw stuff on the field, then it's going to be a viral video. People will be like, look at this idiot.
Yeah, exactly. So. That's exactly right. Christian, do you think Jim Eichenhofer will throw something to an umpire on the baseball diamond?
No, I don't think Jim would. Todd Graffinini might.
Yes, well, he won overwhelmingly when we unofficially polled people who would be the person to throw something on the court. As always, Christian, we appreciate it. You know what? I'm not even going to say enjoy your off season. We'll bug you at some point between now and the start of next season. Thank you, bud. Appreciate your time as always. Our thanks to Christian Clark, as always. Very insightful on how we look at it. There's so many different elements to what Jose means to a team. It'll be interesting to see what he works on in the summer and his importance to a team next year.
It's just my situation, and I'm okay with that, and I understand that. So I just got to figure that out from that when those conflicts come. But I always think in this league, it's always going to be a fight for me. Like I said, I'm 5'11", 6 foot on a good day. I'm only getting older, so I got to be more disciplined, make sure people know that I do belong here. I think I set that tone, but I also got to make sure they keep on believing that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's part of this offseason for him is that the team has an option on him as far as, whether they're going to pick that up or not. And obviously, I mean, I know when he signed the contract extension a couple of years ago, a lot of people were like, including me, was like, man, that's a great team-friendly deal where they have him at low money. He's crucial. I mean, so I'm interested to see what happens this offseason, but he also is going to be playing, for Puerto Rico in the Olympics, and he talked about that a lot during his exit interview. So I think he's just going to come. If we know Jose, he's going to come back extremely determined. He's going to spend a ton of time working on his jump shot. He made big progress on that, even though he was a little discouraged by the way he shot in the playoffs. So looking forward to him coming back in year 4. He's played with Trey Murphy and Herb Jones. They all came in together. I'm curious to see what all of those guys do in the next season. If it just seems like with all those guys, they spend a lot of time working on their games. And one thing too for Jose, compared to last season or last summer, I should say, when he was injured and he didn't get like a full, preparation for the season and then missed the beginning part. I'm looking forward to this year where he has like a full summer to get ready for training camp, and hopefully he's 100% when we get going, and he'll be able to play right off the bat. He'll be able to make an impact, compared to last year where he didn't come back until right before Thanksgiving.
All right, as Jim said, you better read the accompaniment through this podcast. Go check it out at pelicans.com and give Jim a follow, Jim_Eichenhofer, where he reposts everything there as well. As always, appreciate the time, and thank you for tuning us in right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Join us 3 times per week on pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, or where you get your podcasts. And be sure to give Jim and Gus a follow on X at Jim_Eichenhofer and GCat_17. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.